So, if you hadn't noticed, Ja'Marr Chase is different. There are rookie receivers, there's great rookie receivers, and then there's whatever the hell that dude is. I have been putting this episode off for a long time, to the benefit of Bengals fans, by the way. But it's AFC Championship weekend, it's Kansas City versus Cincinnati. It's a matchup between two really incredible young quarterbacks, but more importantly, it's a rematch between Ja'Marr Chase and all of his sons, collectively known as the Chiefs secondary. Chase had a massive day against this defense back in Week 17, the last time they played. And to be honest, having a massive day isn't really that out of the ordinary for Ja'Marr Chase, because he's just that good. So today what we're going to be doing is taking a look at the Ja'Marr Chase problem, so to speak. We'll go over how Cincinnati uses him to basically be the engine of their passing game. We'll take a look at what he did the last time he faced KC and why he was so successful, and we'll look at what the Titans did last week in the divisional round from a schematic perspective to at least try to slow Chase and Burrow down. It is a jam-packed episode today, as you can imagine, so kick back, go grab yourself a drink, and let's get into this film. The Bengals are an explosive passing offense, obviously, but they're explosive mainly only in one way: deep balls off of three-step drops. And when I say deep balls, I really just mean 9 routes down the boundary whenever they get one-on-ones out there with either Chase or T. Higgins. They thrive off of basically turning football into basketball. It's just contested catch after contested catch, go ball after go ball, and whenever the Bengals need a play, they always do the same thing, and it works almost every single time. They'll just have Joe Burrow read the safeties, find whatever matchup those safeties are not bracketing, and then he'll throw it up against single coverage and let his guys go try to make a play. That's basically it. And to be honest, with their receiving talent, more often than not, they're going to get those chunks. And once they get those chunks, it sets up more scoring opportunities inside the red zone. And statistically speaking, the more red zone opportunities you can generate on a per drive basis, the more points you're going to score in the long run. If you want to know exactly how the Bengals beat the Chiefs the first time they played them, for instance, well, it was those 9 routes. Those deep balls were the difference makers. For instance, take a look at this red zone opportunity from about halfway through the second quarter in that game. Cincy is down by 2 possessions at this point, so they absolutely need a touchdown here so the game doesn't get too out of hand. And in order to get it, they get into a trips look to the field. Trips to the field means that there are 3 receiving threats to the field side, or the wide side of the field, whatever you want to call it, and there are 2 receiving threats, including the running back, to the boundary side. Now, most teams are not going to play standard cover 2 into a trips look to the field because it's way too easy to overload that field side safety if he has to try to cover 2 guys at once. And you're kind of putting everything on your linebackers to both key the run and be able to help undercut the number 3 receiver if he releases vertical to the deep middle of the field on like 4 verticals calls and stuff like that. So most defensive coordinators don't really bother with cover 2 here. Instead, what a lot of them prefer are match quarters calls as a trips check, just like the one that the Chiefs are in here. Now, the thing to remember with most versions of quarters is that in a 3-by-1 look, this backside corner and the receiver are just in man coverage all the way. Nick Saban calls this Meg, or man everywhere he goes. So they'll zone match to the front side and play a box coverage, or 4/3, whatever you want to call it, in order to handle the 3 guys in the trips, and then you'll have the will linebacker or the money backer, depending on your personnel grouping. He'll be the rat in the middle of the field to help with shallow crosses and other routes like that. And then the boundary side safety is responsible for pushing out and handling the running back if he releases fast to the flat, since the linebackers are way out leveraged there and they couldn't stop that even if they tried. So that's the safety's job. Now, the important part as it relates to Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase is that if they know that the Chiefs are going to be calling quarters as their trips check in the red zone, which, let's be honest, a lot of teams are going to do that because it's a pretty safe call, then they know that there will likely be nobody to help this corner out against Chase unless they specifically have a bracket call on for that isolated receiver, which some teams just don't do very much of that. This is just how the coverage is structured. It's very sound against a lot of different concepts, but to be honest, if you're going to run this, you need to have a fucking dog of a corner that can hold up with no help on the backside, because he's going to be all alone more often than not, and there's no way around that. And guess what? At least in this game, none of the Chiefs' corners could handle that responsibility one-on-one against Ja'Marr Chase. All Burrow had to do was just check that the safety was pushing to the flat during his drop, which he was, and then right as his back foot hit on that third step, he's just reading the corner's positioning on Chase. If the corner is playing on the high shoulder, meaning he's trying to stack on the route from the top down, Burrow knows to throw a back shoulder ball at the near pylon because the corner would have no way to fight through Chase's body in order to get to that ball. Conversely, if the corner was playing low shoulder or in trail technique, well, that's even easier because then he could just lead the ball even further towards the back pylon and Chase could just win with his speed and run away from the guy. In this instance, as you can see, the DB was playing high shoulder position, so Burrow knew to throw the ball to the near pylon, which he did, and Chase paid it off with a touchdown. Cincinnati did this over and over and over again against a variety of coverages. They used their favorite concept, which is called 989, several times in order to stress the Chiefs deep and to force them into giving a one-on-one matchup at least somewhere on the outside. And by the way, it's called 989 because it's basically just a 9 route, a middle read post, and then another 9 route. So 989 on the numerical route tree. And again, it literally is the simplest play you can call. There's no trickery involved whatsoever. But because of its simplicity and its ability to just force a defense to choose who gets to be one-on-one, it really does turn football into just a fancier version of basketball. Throw it up, let your receivers go be power forwards, and if their corners aren't good enough to stop it, well, that's on them. The entire Bengals game plan on offense this whole season has just been, we're more talented than you, deal with it. And I gotta say, it's been super entertaining to watch. Quite frankly, if you leave Ja'Marr Chase one-on-one on the outside, Joe Burrow knows that that's a big play waiting to happen, and most of the time, he's gonna be right. The Bengals feed off of those big plays, just like Kansas City feeds off of big plays to Tyreek and Kelsey and Mecole and all those guys. Both of these teams are very much like vibes-based offenses, I guess is the best way to say it. Like, as Burrow and Chase go, so does Cincinnati. If they don't get those explosive plays, the offense looks way different. So the operative question is, how do you shut those explosive plays down in order to ostensibly shut down the rest of the offense? Well, the Titans did have some interesting answers last week, and even though they did lose the game, they still did a pretty good job on defense. They sacked Burrow 9 times, which is insane. They mostly bottled up the deep ball, which had plagued defenses all year long, and they did only allow 19 points, with 3 of those being in literally the last second of the game. So by Cincinnati standards, that was actually a pretty below average day on offense. So how did they do that? Well, I'll tell you all about it right after I thank this week's sponsor, Shaker and Spoon. If you were wondering what drink I'm sipping on this week, it's actually from Shaker and Spoon, which is a monthly cocktail subscription box that delivers craft cocktail recipes and ingredients right to your door. Each box gets delivered with 3 new recipes created by world-class bartenders just for Shaker and Spoon subscribers, as well as enough ingredients for 12 total drinks, which is 4 of each recipe. Each box is themed around one type of liquor, or a season, or in some cases both, and you never need more than 1 bottle of that base spirit in order to complete all of the recipes in each box, if you don't want to build up a large surplus, like some of us have over the years. For me, I'm a big mezcal guy for cocktails, so I got myself another mezcal box, which has one of my favorite drinks ever inside of it, which is called Brush of the Bush. If you like smoky flavors and agave and cherry vanilla with a little bit of sage, that is the drink for you. I promise you will not regret it. And honestly, really all the drinks in the box are fantastic, and I highly recommend all of them because they are so different from one another. So if you do want to try out Shaker and Spoon for yourself and try out all of these drinks and many, many more on a monthly basis, you can go to shakerandspoon.com/filmroom or use promo code filmroom at checkout for $20 off your first box. Again, that is shakerandspoon.com/filmroom or use promo code filmroom for $20 off your first box. Alright, so let's talk about how Tennessee approached the Cincinnati offense last weekend from a schematic perspective to kind of slow them down, and let's look at how Cincinnati countered that in the final moments of the game when it mattered the most. When you look at Tennessee's game plan, you could tell that they were very aware of how much Burrow likes to throw deep balls down the boundary right when he hits the top of his drop, because they played a lot of variations of cover 2 and quarter half coverages where you have one safety over the top in order to prevent Chase from beating them deep, and you also have a corner playing aggressively underneath in order to shut off the short stuff like slants, glances, stop routes. You get the idea. And they did this not just because it took away Chase's ability to rip off big gains on deep balls, but because they also knew that if they could just make Burrow have to go from his first read to his second read, his offensive line could not hold up. Burrow at this point is a one-read quarterback, not because he can't go through progressions, because obviously he can, but because his offensive line is so bad that they only allow him to be a one-read quarterback. If you take away Chase or Higgins or whoever the primary is on the play, odds are that you can get him to hold that ball long enough for you to crush his terrible interior offensive line and get after him. So, like any good coaching staff would do, the Titans stuck with this principle all day long. They would show one high coverages or zero or literally anything other than cover 2 or quarter half, and then they would rotate into those half-field coverages in order to get a deep safety over the top. They would take away the fades and the 9 routes, and once those are taken away, I mean, there was almost nothing else left for Burrow. He did not have the time he needed in order to get to his second and third progressions. And when you combine those half-field coverages that protect against the deep ball with all of the stunts and pressures that Tennessee was calling up front, I mean, it was a very, very long day for Burrow in the pocket. I remember one particularly nasty look from late in the game. It was a 3rd and 8 with about 4 minutes left, and Tennessee was once again showing pressure with a single high safety in the post, but it wasn't cover 1 or fire zone or anything like that, and it was actually a bluffed pressure with a rotation to cover 2 man on the back end, which most coaches these days call cover 5. And because this linebacker was bluffing like he was bringing pressure on, say, a fire zone call, even though he was actually just responsible for the running back in man coverage, his bluff drew the right guard in protection just long enough so that the left side of the offensive line had to try to handle this flush stunt from the Titans with 3-on-3 rather than 4-on-3, which obviously they were nowhere near good enough to do. So Tennessee was basically able to scheme up a way for the offensive line to just let Jeffrey Simmons through with no resistance, while still getting 5 guys in man coverage on every single receiving threat and having 2 deep safeties in their deep half zones in order to stop Burrow from just chucking it up to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. Like I said earlier, it was a brilliant game plan that, for the most part, worked. The deep ball is the engine that makes Cincinnati go. I think everybody knows that at this point. So they just took that away and made Cincy try to beat them with everything else. And they couldn't do it. Or at least they couldn't do it until the final minute of the game. Remember when I said earlier that Cincy finally pulled out a great counterpunch to this style of coverage right when they needed it the most? Well, this is that counterpunch. Here is the very next play that Burrow stepped on the field after that 3rd and 8 sack that you just saw. It's still a tie game, 16 points apiece, there's 20 seconds left on the clock, and they're at about midfield with 2 timeouts remaining, so the whole field is available to them. Now, in this situation, it's unlikely that they're going to see zone coverage because the Titans cannot afford to just give up cheap yards because the Bengals don't have that long to go until they get into field goal range. Cough, cough, I'm looking at you, Buffalo. And so because the Bengals know that they probably won't get zone, and they also probably will get another 2 high safety shell in order to keep a lid on Chase from going straight down the boundary, that really only leaves one coverage left on the table. Cover 5 again. With Zach Taylor knowing that in all likelihood this is gonna be cover 5, he leans on Jamar Chase to essentially win the game for him with the one route that they still have in their bag to beat this coverage to the boundary. A corner route. Some of you know it as a flat 7. Now, pay attention to the way that Chase runs this, because it really is his route running acumen that wins this ball game here for Cincinnati and sends them to the AFC Championship. He knows that in cover 5, the safety's job is to open up at a 45-degree angle and work deep to the boundary to take away any opportunity at a go ball, and he also knows that the corner's job is to play trail position from inside leverage in order to take away short and intermediate in-breaking routes to the middle, since there are no zone droppers over the middle in this coverage, and the corner absolutely cannot afford to get beat inside. So with the safety playing deep and outside, and the corner playing underneath and inside, there's really only one place that Joe Burrow can throw this ball, and that's at about a 15-yard depth right at the boundary. That is the hole in this coverage, so to speak. But it's only going to be a hole if Chase runs his route correctly, which of course he does. Right at the snap, Chase jab released outside and immediately stacked on top of Janoris Jenkins to take control of the route, which made the safety panic even more, so he just kept backing up. And at this point, Jenkins is just along for the ride here. He has to go wherever Chase points him to, because he's about 2 steps behind him and way out of phase. He got smoked way too quickly on the release. Now, at the same time, before Chase even snaps this route off, you can already see Burrow starting to release this ball once he hit the top of his drop, because he already knows it's going to be open. Chase won his position at the release so quickly, and the safety is already panicking, so there's kind of nothing Tennessee can do about this. From there, Chase sells that inside break with a jab step and a little nod to the inside, which simultaneously freezes the safety and gets Jenkins running in the wrong direction, and then he just snaps the route off flat to a 15-yard depth underneath the safety where he has no chance in hell of getting to it, and he's well outside of Jenkins as well, so he can't undercut it either. Burrow's pass gets there on time and on target, and just like that, the Bengals are in field goal range on the 33-yard line with 15 seconds left. Game, set, match. And it's all because of the fear that Ja'Marr Chase creates in a defense. The Titans did an admirable job throughout this game, and they came very close to winning. But when it comes right down to it, stopping Chase and Burrow from doing whatever they want to do for 60 consecutive minutes, that's just damn near impossible. Alright, so there's a little overview of how Cincinnati generates explosive plays, how they use some of their favorite concepts back in Week 17 to obliterate this Chiefs defense the first time around, and also we looked a little bit at what the Titans defense does from a schematic perspective to at least sort of slow them down. Will the Chiefs take some cues from Tennessee and not rely so much on single high coverages and quarters on the back end, and kind of lean a little bit more on cover 2 in order to put a cap over the top of Chase and kind of force them to beat them with the run game? I mean, maybe, yeah, they could do that. The Chiefs do run a lot of different variations of cover 2 as it is, so it wouldn't be that unheard of for them to just kind of stick to those pages of the playbook and force Cincinnati to beat them more with Joe Mixon than Ja'Marr Chase. But again, we'll see. This is a very familiar matchup between two teams that just played against each other a few weeks ago, and honestly, I'm sure that Zach Taylor and Steve Spagnuolo both have a lot of different wrinkles that they want to reintroduce to each other this coming weekend. Either way, regardless of these schematic changes on the field this week, one thing definitely remains true, which is if you leave Ja'Marr Chase one-on-one on the outside, you're probably going to lose, and you're probably going to lose a lot. I'll see you all back here next week for another episode, and until then, cheers.